on Thursday, August the 11th, 2022, in the boardroom of Oak Park and River Forest High School, and ask for a roll call.
Ms. Spivey?
Here.
Dr. Maharaj?
Here.
Mr. Arkin?
I'm here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Martieri?
Virtually present.
Ms. Harris? And Mr. Costi?
Here. I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employer or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. Collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. May I please have a second?
Second.
And may we have a roll call?
Dr. Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Arkin?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Ms. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Costi?
Yes. Flipperama.
struggle with the same issue.
It is.
Session of the cow, and our next topic is public comment. Public comment. Please limit comments to 3 minutes on issues concerning matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education. And this section is not intended to be a dialogue with the board, but a chance to inform. So I believe we have public comment.
We have 2 public comments for tonight. We have 1 in person. So I call for Ms. Julie Cote Hopper.
I don't know everybody here. I know Greg really well, and I know.
The podium.
Okay, I'll make sure the
The podium.
What are we doing?
The
podium.
Shirley, can you help her out with the mic too? Make sure it's on.
Now, let's make sure you're all ready.
It's like really official.
So I wondered if the board could, we met, a couple of us parents met May, I want to say it was early May, right after, 2 days after Uvalde shooting, with Greg Johnson and Lee Parker. I don't know which one is she there? There we go. And I, obviously summer came, we kind of took our eyes off the ball. And Greg had mentioned that you guys were working with the to get the resource officers back on campus, and possibly some other things. So I just wanted to get an update and see if you guys, what's been working on that, because I really don't like to see these kind of headlines in my local paper. I mean, I moved out here from the city, for District 200 and District 90. Well, not 200, but I moved out here in 2008. My kids were going to Sacred Heart. Obviously, they probably would have been going to St. Ignatius, but I decided to stick with the public schools because I think it's more diverse. So anyway, I wonder if you guys could give me an update on what the status is on all that, so I can report back to the other parents that didn't want to show up tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Via Zoom, we have Mr. Russell Suzo.
Can you hear us?
I think I'm unmuted now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Please begin at your pleasure.
Good evening, board members and administration. My name is Ross Suzo, and I'm a parent of a current junior here at OPRF. Additionally, our oldest son just graduated from Oak Park this past spring. I volunteer with the Boosters and currently serve on OPRF's Community Council. For starters, I'd like to wish good luck and good fortune to all those involved with OPRF this coming school year, particularly the teachers and students. As OPRF students are preparing to return to the classroom next week after several challenging school years, many in our community believe now is the time OPRF puts forth a commitment that encourages and protects open discussion. Framework that not only encourages open discussion, but demands it, and understands that debate is a proven way to solve complex challenges. With that in mind, me and 91 others who are supportive of this statement would like OPRF to consider adopting the statement that I will read in about 90 seconds. But first, some context. In 2014, the University of Chicago formed a committee of university faculty to articulate the following: the university's overarching commitment to free, robust, and uninhibited debate. These resulting Chicago principles have since become quite famous and have been adopted by universities and colleges across the country. Schools such as Princeton, Purdue, Johns Hopkins, American University, University of Wisconsin, Claremont McKenna, Kent, the Citadel, you get it, just to name a few. One could easily make the case that these principles are even more relevant today than they were back in 2014 when they were drafted. Such principles now seem applicable, if not necessary, to high school environments, in addition to college campuses. That is why I'm speaking here tonight. The statement that we are asking to be debated and in some form be adopted by this board is the following, quote, and I will share this. I sent a copy of this to Linda as well, so she has it. Quote, Oak Park and River Forest High School believes that a fundamental aspect of our mission is to develop critical thinkers who can navigate a complex world through civil discourse, respectful inquiry, engaged listening, and open consideration of multiple perspectives. Key to fulfilling this charge is the cultivation of a school environment in which all students feel welcome and free to explore a wide range of ideas. Our firm commitment to this principle reflects not only OPRF's obligation to prepare our students for their future, but our belief that the open exchange of ideas lies at the core of a democratic society in which individuals are accountable for their actions and treat one another with dignity, compassion, and respect, end quote. We believe that such a commitment to debate based on fact and data will help teachers, students, and our community in the long run. We respectfully ask for a formal response if the OPRF Board of Education will discuss and vote on such a statement at a near-term board meeting. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay,
That ends tonight's public comments.
thank you very much. Okay, moving on in our agenda, our next order of business is the public, the minutes. So I move to approve the June 9th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented. Are there any corrections, adjustments that need to be made? May I have a second then?
Second.
And we can do this via voice. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? The ayes have it, and the meeting's minutes are approved. We will move into our finance section, and I will turn the show over to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. So up to present our tentative budget for coming school year here is Cindy Sidor, our CFO. Cindy, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Can you bring up the one, actually the board doc comments? So with this, actually, I'm not going through a presentation because I think there was a lot of information put into the board doc. There was also graphs and charts. So I think I'm just going to move to if there's any questions that the board has. This is the tentative, so this is right for next month will be the one that gets it out. Which one you want for the?
So, questions on the tentative budget or materials presented? Let's see, Ralph. No, I know, I'm just.
You know, Cindy, I had a little question. I lost my notes on it. I'll just contact you later. It's not a big deal.
Perfect, thank you.
Other, I have a couple, but I did review this. So mine more are in a question and then a request. The question is, there does seem to be a lot of movement in the revenue associated with, what is it called, Cindy?
CPPRP.
Thank you. And so, it seems to be changing rather significantly, on a percentage basis, which is significant. So, keeping abreast of it, of what's driving that, it has a huge impact on, you're talking, it's increased by $2 or $3 million, correct? So that's a big enough impact item to keep an eye on and understand. So that's one of the two requests. The second request is that also included is the multi-year 5-year projection model. And I really feel it's critical that the key assumptions that are tied to that are included, because otherwise it's just a sheet of numbers and we are left with a lot of questions. So that I'd like to see that as standard, just down to what the key assumptions are. What's the levy assumption? What's the long, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And, as we use that data to make informed decisions, we need to understand that. So those were my two asks on a moving forward basis. Nothing else on that.
We can have that ready for the September.
Yeah, and I think the finance committee will, I think they need to have the key role in that. So that needs to come through and they need to vet that. But I'm just doing it here as it relates to the presentation. Okay. Seeing nothing on this, we would move on to our next agenda item.
Can I just ask a question? Because I've only been to village board meetings in River Forest, so I don't know how you guys operate. So you don't have to respond to the questions that the open public. I'm just curious. I've only been to the village River Forest meeting, so I don't know. And they always respond when public comment happens, and I don't know how you guys run the things here, so I don't know.
So public comment is not meant to be a dialogue. It's meant to be a chance for you to speak. And then if there are questions raised, if it's not addressed in the meeting, which there are agenda items tied to what you had mentioned. Okay, so there is item on the agenda, but the district, we'll get back to you if it hasn't been addressed in reasonable time in the next few weeks.
What's reasonable time?
Up to 2 weeks.
Up to 2 weeks.
Yes, it's not board, it's up to 2
Okay.
weeks.
Because it was initially addressed in early May, so.
Right, so we are now, the resolution. Are there any, and this will be presented,
This is so we can put it on display and also put it in the paper.
any questions on the resolution? And the resolution will be presented for vote, or, I mean, we don't,
It is a special.
yes, that's what I was just trying to get to, so we'll get this one handled today. Okay, we'll move on. Our next order of business is the roofing, masonry, electrical, and plumbing bids.
Okay, so this is for work for the coming year as part of our plan. Executive Director of Operations Ron Anderson and Allison Sternquist from FGM are here to give an overview and answer any questions.
We brought this forward earlier this year because earlier this year, we on board that there's a lead time on roofing materials that we have to order supplies for next summer earlier this year because of supply chain demands. So we went out to bid for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing that goes along with the roofing. And the results that you see inside of the memo, as you can see, there was only one item that didn't come back with a bid. I did no one bid on. That was mechanical. So we plan on going back out to bid for that item. And the remaining balance after bids was, you can't see.
It's preliminarily with contingency and soft costs estimated, there's approximately $669,351 left after bidding for whatever comes in for that rebid.
Yes.
Also note, the 10-year maintenance or 10-year plan item masonry work was also included in this bidding along with the roofing. So those bid numbers are the low bidders that you see, and we did perform scope reviews and all of them are qualified and had all the scope. So those are confirmed qualified bids.
Questions?
Glad to see that you're looking to replace that you're happy. So it's required for help. So.
Just looking for Ralph, that's all. You guys can help me just to make sure. Can we read anything? My question is that I couldn't figure out what, if you looked at what our budgets were or what was for the mechanical, it doesn't mean anything to me to say that we're 660,000 short when we have an incomplete bid package and without having seen that. I think there might have been some stuff shared today, but I didn't.
So to clarify, and I'd like to share generalities because we don't want to influence future bids in stating specific numbers. If that's okay, I can state.
That's fine. No,
okay.
I don't want to.
But in general, the reason you didn't see specific line items for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing in the 10-year plan was because they're sort of baked into the roofing numbers as in the district's budget. But the expectation for what the bids were going to come in at was significantly less than this remaining dollar amount for what the scope of work that would have been in there. And we did share the details of those numbers in that document that we sent to you. Our anticipation is based on what we expect the potential cost for that additional air handler to be, that you would likely still come in within budget. You might go slightly over, but as noted in the summary that we gave, you have $500,000 slotted for that unit in 2029. that would go away. So in doing it now, you would actually probably, you'd be able to get it done likely within the budget that you have right now.
And one other question, I just lost it. It's Fred, looked like he was gonna. I left my brain.
The what?
Your question?
No, I didn't have a question.
Sarah did.
Yeah, I do. I'm just, so, we've got our new sustainability policy, et cetera. I'm just wondering if with this air handler replacement, if it presents another opportunity for us to install something that might be more environmentally friendly than what we've had before.
Absolutely, and actually Steve Bremer, the mechanical engineer, is on the call for the next conversation. Steve, if you want to describe it would be significantly more efficient than the ancient unit that you have right now and would provide much better air quality in the space that's there. Steve, are you available? Are you there?
I am here.
So the question was, what would be, from a sustainability perspective, any increased efficiency and better qualities for the unit that we would be installing for above the West Pool area as opposed to what they currently have?
I do not know what the efficiency is of the current unit. I can get information related to efficiencies of the new unit. The pro with respect to the new unit is it is capable of being programmed for use in other spaces. It would be able to serve the pool today, but then in the future, if the space was converted to anything else, the unit could be programmed to properly serve that space. A dedicated pool unit serves pool units very well. However, it does not serve comfort cooling or other spaces very well.
So it won't go to waste prior to that.
Right, it'll still be
Yes.
flexible enough to adapt.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I would just add on that, in concert with what Sarah was saying, we need to keep score of the various advances we make in efficiency and sustainability as we migrate through these continued efforts.
And while Steve indicated that we don't know the specifics on that right now off the top of our brains, we can get that detailed information to you guys.
So if we ended up, I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself or getting ahead of us here, but if we ended up doing geothermal for the track, underneath the track, that an air handler is still needed, right?
Yes.
Like it's a totally separate part of the system, but I don't know, okay?
That's why I've got these guys on, because we're getting beyond my personal
Okay.
expertise too. So yeah, yes, the air handlers would still be required for this and for the future additional ones for the building.
Any other questions on this subject? Okay, thank you. Our next topic. I think this is long. Is track and field.
Well, the same crew is here for the next item as well. This is the scope and estimated cost of the track and field work. And I just want to highlight quickly, I know you're going to say a few words, that this has really two components in it, as we discussed previously. This has not only the scope of the track and fields project that we've been discussing for a while, both at the village, at different village meetings and here at the board, but also the geothermal considerations that are aligned to our sustainability policy. So I don't know if you have more you'd like to say by way of introduction, otherwise we can open it up.
And the good news of the special use permit.
Absolutely. So the special use permit for the light is not noted in this because this happened after this was prepared for the board, but the special use permit was approved by the village plan commission. And it will be moving to the village board on September 6th for further discussion and approval there.
So I can give an overview. There's a lot of detail in the memo and the information that we sent across, but I can give a high level overview of what's happened since the last time that we talked to everybody. So we got we got an estimate, but then we needed to update the information based on the developments in the discussions with the park district and with the village and with what was going to be actually be able to be built at the South Field in particular at Lake Street. And to ensure Title IX equity, which has to be perfectly equitable. So where we couldn't provide certain things for softball, that meant that could not be provided for baseball because of what we were capable of doing. So we adjusted the estimate based on that. Also, in development that went the opposite way in the estimate during those conversations was that cameras would need to be added over at Ridgeland Common and fiber for security purposes. And so that was added to the estimate that wasn't there previously. We had it at Lake Street, but we didn't have it at Ridgeland Common. So the number that you see is where we've come to based on the conversations with the village. And so that work came out at approximately $15.7 million is the current estimate for the work without any geothermal included. So with regard to geothermal, we had originally been looking at, because they're more efficient doing vertical wells drilled, but there are significant amount of hindrances in going that direction. The IDPH considers it a closed loop system, and therefore you're not allowed to be within a certain distance of sewer or detention, water detention. So with what would be needed out in the West Fields for detention, it limited the amount of space that we had. We were still considering it, but then when we spoke in depth with men from Geothermal Inc., who does this on a regular basis, and got into the details of what logistically it was going to take to drill those wells, it just did not seem remotely feasible from a schedule perspective and from a cost perspective. And those details are in the memo. So we started talking about horizontal drilling, which basically they need 3 trenches. They need a trench on either end, and then a central trench that they do the horizontal drilling below ground through. So the space could be undisturbed or they could continue construction in some amount above where things are being horizontally bored up below grade, which helped with schedule. It also takes less time. There's more the equipment and the crews are more available. So our schedule concerns are significantly less with this. It would lengthen the schedule a little bit, but not anything that we feel is not feasible to accomplish with what the district needs. It's also more cost effective. So you don't get as much out of it, but with what the district has available and the time and the constraints, it feels like the best way to go if the district is going to do geothermal. So the installation cost is somewhere in the 4.1 to 4.6 range is the estimate, the current estimate we have without the full system being designed yet. It's a preliminary estimate through talking with the representative from Geothermal Inc. and with the engineers that are available to answer any questions if you want. So in addition to that, we looked at what would we be able to serve with this and what would be operational costs and what would that change with the first install costs. And so if we do geothermal with what we're looking at for the format that we're looking at preliminarily, it would serve all of the cooling needs of project 2 and some of the heating needs. And I'm going to ask my engineers to jump on if I'm saying anything wrong. You would need to install electric equipment, heat pumps for this, which is the district is looking to move away from natural gas, but natural gas at the moment is more cost effective on an operational perspective than electric. So the install of the equipment is approximately a wash when you're just looking at the mechanical system for project 2. The cost of the geothermal wells would be a complete add and you wouldn't actually have a payback for that install cost because at the moment electric costs more than natural gas. So we are in the process of getting the details of the operational costs for you. We'll get that to you in the coming days. So you will have it before you make a decision. There's also, while electric is more costly, you do have the opportunity to offset some of those costs if you were to install solar, but then there's the added cost, upfront cost of paying for that. So we're working on that particular analysis for everybody. So that's, it really comes down to, does the district want to spend the additional investment to go away from natural gas? It would, by doing the geothermal, if you would go away from natural gas without doing geothermal, that would be significantly more expensive on an operational basis than installing geothermal and electric. But the cheapest operational at the moment is the conventional system of an operational.
And also the geothermal gives us opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint.
Correct.
And not only that, going with horizontal wells gives us opportunity to utilize more of our real estate, because we could use the fields of under the football field and under the tennis court as well for wells.
I have a question. I don't know if you, I have a question, but I'm not sure if you've addressed it in prior. Have we seen comparative cost long-term on this?
So that would be part of the operational costs, and that's what we're working on. And right now they're high level based on preliminary estimates of what the load for the building for project 2 would be, and what we know your current rates to be, and that would help you project out.
In the previous district I was in, they did make a move to geothermal, and one of the considerations in their board meeting was around how much the savings was going to be long-term, switching to that form of energy source. So that I would really want to see that.
Yeah, I had several. Are you done with your presentation? Okay. Sure. So, several questions. So in terms of, I mean, the cost of the track of 15.2 million is roughly where you're at, 14.7.
15.7.
Okay. There's also, in here, I saw a 10-year overlap.
Yes.
Okay, which by creating this, if we go forward with and expend this 15.7, then we realize that we do not have to spend another 2.9 million.
Correct.
Okay, so there is roughly, so I mean,
And that's
you're
actually,
talking about 12, what, 12.6 or something like
and
that.
it's actually even better news than that, because that's just the before escalation and soft cost number. That's just the above the line number. So it's actually significantly greater savings than that. That's just the easy number to produce.
So if we put in this geothermal infrastructure, how long does that last? I mean, does that have to be replaced in 30 years, 50 years, 100 years?
Dan, Wesley, are you on?
Yeah, so it's a plastic pipe, and we all know plastic doesn't last forever, but it lasts a long time. I would anticipate a 30-year life cycle on the underground piping. That doesn't mean the whole thing would have to be replaced, but I would imagine you would have to start replacing sections of it. New boreholes would have to be drilled.
Okay, so and then there's an additional that would be captured after you install the geothermal. Then there's another 2.65 million of investment for the actual systems.
Yeah, so
heat pump systems.
Right, so it'd be.
Which,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just pointing out that there's an additional cost because now you got to move.
Right, it'd be the heating cooling plant inside the building.
Okay, And
That was
is,
approximately a
and-
wash with
right,
what
and
was
so what
cost
I'm
and
just trying to understand this. So that's if we build project 2. Okay.
Correct.
That's already would be contemplated in project 2, and if we use the standard system, it'd be roughly the same.
Correct.
Okay. So what if we don't build project 2? If project 2 doesn't get off the ground, all right, what can we do with this geothermal system?
Well, the existing cooling plant is shy of total building cooling capacity. I don't know by how many tons. I discussed it with Fred, but I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. We can add additional water-to-water heat pumps within the building, the existing building, to add cooling capacity to the building. Any renovations you do where we've put in boilers in the past, you can put in geothermal, heater coolers, water-to-water heating cooling units. So we can expand off of the geothermal well system at any time within the existing building. It doesn't have, the wells outside do not have enough capacity to take care of the whole building. Not even close. Unfortunately, the heating capacity of the geothermal heat pumps, it's just not that much heat. It gives us heat. It gives us a great amount of heat when we, put a lot of units in. But the well system has to support that heat, the heat rejection, heat absorption. And that well system doesn't, won't give us what we need. It'll give us a fraction.
for heating, but for cooling, talk about what it gives for cooling there.
Yeah, for cooling, we can get, I think we calculated about 800 tons of cooling out of the well system, which is a substantial amount of cooling. I mean, your existing chiller plant, going off of memory again, is between 900 and 1,100 tons. So, it's a lot of cooling.
But we're still in the same conundrum in terms of the use of natural gas versus electricity.
Correct. This geofield is not going to get rid of your natural gas usage.
But what we should be expecting then sometime in the near future is a report of whether generating our own electricity through solar energy, all right, may reduce our need to purchase electricity, and thus that would be the savings.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And you have enough roof for about 2 megawatts of solar generation.
Mm-hmm. And with that run,
that's a lot of power.
Okay. So from my perspective then, I mean, that's critical. All right. Because without that, we're talking about about a $4.6 million investment. All right. In sustainable, in a sustainable energy here. So it becomes more of a, for me, then it becomes more of a community values decision.
Right? Absolutely is what it is.
Then making that $4.6 million investment, is that the value of our community? All right, to go sustainable, cut down our carbon footprint, et cetera, without having a substantial, without being able to put a finger on it on a payback.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So that was basically my questions and comments.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, one other quick one is, I saw something about lighting the tennis courts.
Yes,
And that's included in this as
correct, that's part of the 15%.
Okay.
And those numbers, the geothermal don't include any incentives that may be out there from the government for sustainability practices.
Right. Oh, yeah, that was another question.
So
Are there any rebates, grants?
That's what we're working on that with Company and NICOR, because it's a combination of electrical and gas.
Will you be able to get us some of that information?
Well, I sent it out and they said they're waiting on some legislation to pass.
Oh. Okay.
So I'm waiting on that. So I can give you a positive answer. I can get that picture back.
Thank you.
All right, Marianne?
So I think I have three things. One is, I just want to clarify, we don't currently, like the Village of Oak Park has a sustainability fund. We don't have one at Opera, right? We haven't set up a separate fund for that. So this is like thinking ahead to the long-term plan, whether it might make sense to set some benchmarks and some goals on, you know, what do we want to do in terms of, do we want to set a goal for reducing our carbon footprint by X amount, by X date? Or do we want to set up a fund, or like do we want to commit X amount of dollars over the next 10 years to it? So I guess that's really just sort of a question for the board to consider. The village fund, I was just looking it up, has a little over, 1.7 million for the village with specific revenue sources that are tied to that, right? That go into the fund. So we wouldn't be setting it up the same way. In terms of the carbon footprint, we don't have any goals, like we don't have any specific goals, or do we? Yeah, that's my
The
question.
policy that was voted on last meeting has 6 goals
6, so are there,
that basically frame our vision for what we want to achieve in the key sustainability areas, including carbon footprint or greenhouse gas, and then some of the other areas of sustainability. So
so
yes, but it does not, to kind of cover your question, there's no specific funding description of we will have a fund. It's just part of our, current, that's not part of the policy thus far or the plan.
and the goals are kind of like general goals, it's not like reduce it X amount by X date.
The goals are reduce our carbon footprint from a 2000 and what's our benchmark, 2012?
2012.
So by 40% by year 20, there are numbers and dates.
Okay, so if when you come back and present the next piece, if you could just remind us, like, how far will this take us towards that goal? Would be helpful to me. Does that make sense? So thank you. And I just want to say the report overall I thought was very clear and super helpful, and you convinced me on the horizontal versus vertical. So I appreciate that. I think then my only other question, I have one question about the PA system, which is not in here, just because I saw there was discussion for village about that. Is that going to be an issue, or is it going to be fine?
Well, it needs a little discussion for sure. And exactly what path that takes is too early for me to predict or go, but the issue I can find, and that is this. And on the backfield where our varsity baseball and our softball fields are, and on the Lake Street field, where we've had all sorts of sports, right? We have a PA system, a portable PA system that we have historically used and will use this school. And we need to make sure that whatever is approved with the village does not impede our ability to do what we have done. We need that for our program to function. So
yeah, I thought it was
so
great.
thanks.
I thought it was great that the lighting went through. I just wanted to make sure that the PA thing also happens. And then my general feeling is that I think probably going towards geothermal makes sense. I would like us to make sure that we use it as an educational opportunity for the students, right? And that we get the sustainability club involved, and perhaps they might want to do an exhibit or something like that to really make concrete and visible the choices that they're making, right? So yeah, I'll pass on.
Great.
And just, Marion kind of took my question a little bit, but I will make sure I asked it for clarity. So based on a number, I know we've talked about scenarios from natural gas to electric, so on and so forth. But what I didn't really hear was how much does it reduce our emission or footprint, right? So what's that ballpark number? What's the percentage? Because it's great to say we're doing something awesome for sustainability, but if we can't quantify it, I think it just doesn't make much sense to me unless I know what we're actually doing to actually affect our current carbon footprint.
So we can work on that number, but it does eliminate the use of natural gas in Project 2.
Correct.
for,
But again, that doesn't tell the full
Yes.
picture of it, right?
Right.
So we're trying to get away, stop short of fracking. I mean, what is the actual point of it, right? So it's good, it's nice to hear, well, get rid of natural gas. I'd like to know why.
right,
How does that help? And how does that help us in this particular community of Oak Park? How does that help our footprint reduce and by how much and what's the end goal? Because they just say invest in it because it sounds great and geothermal is awesome. It means nothing to me, I'll be honest, it just doesn't, because if I don't know what it's actually doing, it just sounds like a great talking point we can put up on hashtag high power ourselves and be done with it. So. Well, it's clear.
Yep.
Okay.
no,
thanks.
that's fair enough.
And I think that everyone clarified what I was asking, right? But like, I want to see compared, if we kept the current, kept the current source, energy source, versus what it would mean if we had this energy source, and then long term, what does that actually mean?
I would love to see like graphs, little charts, so we can compare.
Ralph, anything? Okay, so, my questions, just first with the fields. So the next step is, so these are the Pepper preliminary estimates, correct? So just for my benefit, where do we go? First, the alternative, which is in here, is always subject to what happens with the bids, correct? Okay, so just can you, where do we go, forgetting the energy piece, so that's a separate one.
Yeah.
On this.
So we are working on a 50% construction documents set to give to Pepper to update that estimate, which would, the results of that would come in just before we go out to bid. And then when we go out to bid, you would then get, just like with the roofing information, you would get the bid information in and have to approve the bids before you're actually committing to the work.
All right, so I'm fine with that. And then as it relates to this energy issue, I think a lot of it's been expressed. To make an informed decision, okay, in this matter, first of all, I applaud. I think it's great that we're looking at sustainable options, but we've got to frame it up in a way that we can say, here's what it is without doing anything, and what it means if we weren't going to go that path, and then what our alternatives are. As I see it, there's multiple choices here, and I mean, I think the challenge is time. Is that correct?
For the geothermal, it is, because now is the time to do it if you're going to do it, but you could do something down the road, but you wouldn't be able to do the full amount of.
Yeah, so just understanding that decision making, because as I said, you've got geothermal, you've got, there's a multitude of alternatives, including investing in a solar project someplace else, et cetera. So I think we need to see the whole picture and what it means in cost, what it means in sustainability, whether it's in charts and graphs. It needs to, she wants, what do you want charts? I want a table. So we got two for spreadsheets and a couple.
You do some performance art too.
We need a spreadsheet with the chart.
We need to be able to make a comparable, informed decision that looks at capital cost, looks at ongoing cost, looks at the environmental impact in terms of the units, and then we can make an informed decision. So I think that's what I'm hearing collectively from my peers here, okay?
Yes. And to clarify, the decision you're making at the moment will just be about geothermal. What you specifically want to do in projects 2 for solar or anything else will be down the road at such time as we come forward with project 2.
Okay. With that said, we are moving into the world of instruction. Thank you. And we will start with School Link's contract.
Okay, I'm going to invite up now Dr. Fiorenza, our Assistant Student Learning, and Dr. Lamb, our Director of Student Learning. and to present the School Leagues contract that is going to help some of our post-secondary pathways conversations that we heard about this board last spring. So I will turn it over to you. So I'm not sure which one is taking the initial read here. So take it away.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. I am open to answering any questions that the board may have in terms of the request to approve the School Links contract as outlined in the board report.
Questions?
So this is actually replacement, and you guys obviously feel it's an upgrade to the Naviance program that we already are contracted and worked with in here for years, right?
Not necessarily a replacement yet. We are currently in a 3-year contract with Naviance. We have 2 more school years
Right,
remaining.
so there'll be a 2-year overlap.
Yes.
So I want to get a kind of a better feel of that, of how that overlap would work. I mean, will we be running two separate systems for all the kids? Or I think I saw in some of the board questions, the fact that maybe you could start with School Links for freshmen and sophomores, and let the other run its course. And if we did that, is there any cost, will there be any cost differential? And I know this is grant money, I understand that, but I still treat grant money like it's out of our pockets.
So with School Links, what I would do in terms of my approach would use it specifically for components of the PACE framework. So specifically the career interest survey, because we did roll out with Naviance this past school year with their career interest survey. And while the survey was engaging, it was efficient for students to take. It took an incredible amount of time for students to review the results, which is why we saw lower percentages of students that had a saved career or career pathway.
When you say took an incredible amount of time, are you saying there's a delay between the kids, or just for them to go through the results takes a long time?
It would be the latter. So the results would yield hundreds of careers. And when they click into each career, it has very robust information. So it goes over the schooling requirements, the anticipated compensation, the growth. So students found it very hard to go through all of the results of specific careers. And even with the career pathways, they found it difficult, which is why we saw the lower percentages than what we hoped for of the saved careers or pathways. And with a higher percentage, I think that our staff, especially when we're thinking about post-secondary planning, can more effectively plan, because we can think about the types of programs that our students are interested in, the types of careers and so forth.
Did you have a question?
Yes, one quick question. I'm reading the categories in these rows. Can you specifically, if you can, it's fine, say how is it better in relation to like updated college information, just different things. So this is ease of use for career readiness, but how does that affect? How's it better than say Naviance or New Science or GIS? I mean, CI. Yes.
So of the 4 systems that we evaluated, so 2 of them, Naviance and School Links, are the digital platforms that house things such as career interest survey. And the career interest inventory and new science are career and or aptitude surveys, they're standalones. And what we found is that schoolings met every single one of our criteria. So the intuitive and efficiency of use, the high-end user experience. Sometimes you'll hear from our students that they are surveyed out. So having an engaging platform is very important to keep them engaged. Updated college and career information. So in speaking with schoolings, this is something that's continuously updated. And it also pulls from other existing systems. Accessibility of the results. So I found that it's not as cumbersome for students to review their results, similarly to what we experienced with Naviance. So they are able to get their results in Naviance, but to get to the what really interests you the most, that's where we want to hit it home. And then the extensions were quite extensive. So one of them that we found that the other systems didn't have was a vetted mentor system. So they have vetted mentors from different careers, and students can submit questions to the mentors, and mentors will respond via writing, they'll respond via video. And we thought that was a great way to connect our students with people who are already in the field.
Yes. And this also ties into the next question with trades somehow. Does it give information on trades?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. Mhm. And we saw alignment with the programs of study that we currently have, and then it can also provide the results that we can use to grow our programs and diversify our programs.
Good. So my questions as it relates to this contract are more in line with questions from other contracts that we've had. It's a 3-year deal with somebody we've never dealt with before. Granted, it sounds like you've done your homework, and they've, have a reputation within other districts. We have a low current number of students who have, a career path selected, and we want to have everyone. But what's in my head is, we sign a 3-year deal, and what's to prevent, us, if we're not happy, okay, or we're not, we have different interests or don't put the energy behind it, and we're kind of stuck with something. So I don't know what the incentives are. I mean, how do we know we get the desired results and or have the escape out of this that we want to change? Because as I looked at the contract, it was really a PO, right? Maybe I didn't see. So that's my concern that I'd like to address is, how do we make sure that they and we have the energy behind it to achieve desired results? Because entering in an arrangement with somebody, a 3-year deal, then the next thing comes along.
And I understand that, absolutely. So with the contracts that are available through schoolings, they have a 1-year, a 3-year, and a 5-year. With the 3-year, the reason why I chose that one is because, one, it does lock in the pricing over the 3 years. If we do go with a 1-year contract, the pricing can change if we decide to renew the following year. And with the first year, there is a lot of learning that we would have to do, and a lot of evaluation as well. When you think about a possible transition, if that's appropriate from Naviance, schools have used Naviance for a very long time. So our staff is very familiar with the processes, the data that's housed within Naviance, and that transition can take more than 1 year. So those are some of the reasons why we decided to go with a 3-year as opposed to a 1 year.
But do we have then specific goals that we would expect to achieve after, 1, 2, and 3 years? How do we know? I understand the learning curve, okay, but how do we know that we're getting, that 3 years is a long time for an initial, contract?
If I might, yeah, I think what Dr. Lamp has presented is very thorough. So we did go to Maine East, we did go to Naperville. We do need to, and probably in the first year, craft goals about what we expect to see. I think in the first year, we need to learn. When I went to Maine East, there are so many things that this platform can do. It can push out notifications to students, reminders to complete certain things within their career pathway, reminders to connect with mentors. And one of the things I heard the administration in Maine talk about is this is what students are used to. They are used to on their device doing all of this pinging and responding and replying quickly. So I think our main concern is we need to get our students involved in this process. And Naviance is not doing that right now. It's fine for what we need it for certain parts. It's not engaging our kids, and we need to engage our kids so they see the opportunities that are in front of them. So I hear you, and I don't disagree. We will need to craft some goals beyond the first year of just learning what all it can do and what we know we need for our students, and then what we expect to have happen in year 2 and 3. But all of the information we've gotten from the schools we personally visited and talked to their staff, this can do what we need it to do for our students. It engages Maine East kids at record numbers. He was able to show me the dashboard. So if we craft some goals around some of our current baseline data, then we would have what you're asking for, which is a very specific, at the end of 3 years, here's how it met our goals or didn't meet our goals.
Yeah, thank you, because I think what you're addressing what my concern is, which is that you're gonna spend money for something, and then we've gotta do certain things, and they've gotta match to achieve certain targets. Otherwise, we just, we have another gadget that we're not utilizing because we're onto something else, when that's not our intent. But
absolutely, and I think we could rough out some goals prior to the board meeting. We wouldn't have baseline, but we can have some, what we hope to see happen in 3 years prior to an actual approval from the board.
that would be that would kind of give us some of the insight that you have, having seen this through others.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Please.
And can I add one more thing to that?
Certainly.
And the goals would be very much reflective of the PACE framework. Right now is a template for us. We are working towards creating one that's specific to OPRF. And so school links can support those specific benchmarks within the PACE framework.
How frequently will the board hear from students about their experience with this product?
I think that in the first year, with my plan of rolling out the career interest survey prior to the course selection, course enrollment, I would have feedback and data sometime in late fall to be able to share with the board.
Will it only be survey data, or will you have some like focus groups and like more ground level, street level data?
So we definitely can have anecdotal information as well, because what my plan is to utilize our advisories, which is what I did this past school year as well, and then follow up group conversations that counselors have with students during course selection.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I see you.
So a lot of the questions Tom asked would have been answered if we'd followed the policy, creating a rubric for how we're going to evaluate contracts that are being brought to the board for approval. So not to beat the dead horse, Dr. Johnson, but once again, we have a policy in place that could have answered all these questions. And it's not being followed as far as I can tell. So what I would like is to have that discussion moved up to a board meeting. I'd like that policy revisited. I'd like the board to see it again. And I would just like to make sure that the staff is familiar with it.
Thank you, and we have had that discussion in the past, you're right, and that is on our future agendas for this fall. I do want to point out though that there are several items in this board memo and the information that has been shared that frankly I believe does a very good job of satisfying a lot of the information that is in that board policy. Specifically, we're talking about 460, of course. The rubric that is utilized here regarding intuitive and efficiency of use, high internet user experience, accessibility of the actual results. These are things that would be evaluated as noted on an ongoing basis. That is a rubric we have used to evaluate this specific, all the things we have here. And it's something that we will continue to evaluate as we move forward with the 3 years of this process. The point that Tom brings up that I think is really important that you're underscoring too, Ralph, that I appreciate is the key point here of the student results. But I do want to draw the board's attention to the fact that there are several elements identified within that policy, the vast majority that are identified here. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we will look forward to what we get in 2 weeks. Okay, great. This day. For the wonderful discussion on next, we have COVID learning impact update, which is something that we've been awaiting for many meetings. So.
Yes, and so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fiorenza. So during the pandemic school year 2021, we know that COVID-19 contributed to what's widely been called learning loss, learning impact. At OPRF, those effects have been felt by staff and students. During the 2021 school year, we know that 195 students failed 3 or more classes. Of those 195 students, 133 remained enrolled in the 21-22. So that means about 62 students graduated, and in looking at that data, they graduated through ISCR and through summer school.
Can you remind me this?
In-school credit recovery. Of those 133 in the school year we just recently had, 21-22, 45 of those students continued to have 3 or more Fs. So the vast majority was able to get that under control. 45 continued to fail during this past school year. So that, breaking that down demographically, 75% of those students were students of color. While this was a decrease, and a significant decrease, when looking more closely at those 45 students, their attendance was of significant concern. First, in the 2021 school year, the average percent of attendance was between 4 and 25% of the time the students were here. In 21-22, those same students moved to a wide range up from 9% to 88%, but predominantly beyond the 50th%. So significant improvement in attendance when we were back in person, and we didn't have students sitting at home being responsible for getting online, dealing with technology issues, all kinds of things. In addition, the support and services these students received while in person included in-person mentor study. Almost all of these students were West 40 students, so taking advantage of that service, in addition to any social work or counseling services. And then as you saw in the board report, overall, our number of Fs from 2021 to 21-22 decreased by 167 in semester 1 and 281 in semester 2. So we are definitely not back to pre-pandemic numbers. We are definitely moving in the right direction. Last year, I just want to throw out that while we might have wanted the pandemic to have ended, while some people indicated the pandemic had ended because we were back in person, we were still dealing with quarantining and students coming down with the illness, staff having the illness as well. In addition to just the social emotional effects of being at home for a year and a half, responsible for yourself as a young person, and now coming back to school. So we will continue to put our resources into what I believe are very effective interventions. Probably one of the most important is to offer some tutoring beyond the hours of 5 o'clock. So we are looking to hire 2 tutors for the 5 to 7 o'clock timeframe. And we are definitely discussing having one of those individuals do that tutoring via Zoom, so that if students are at home or occupied otherwise, that they can access some one-on-one tutoring for subjects that are difficult for them. In addition, another primary intervention we want to look at adjusting is West 40. So I have a meeting with West 40 program director and the staff that work here in our building to just look at how we're evaluating that program, what goals we're setting with students, how we're holding students accountable, how we're building relationships with students to get them in those classes and really improve that attendance. Questions?
So the credit recovery, do you have a sense, I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, how many of the students, like what percent of the students take advantage of the opportunity for credit recovery? Makes sense as a question.
It does. I don't have an exact percent, I can absolutely get that, but I would say that probably during the school year, not as many as over the summer. So this past school year, we adjusted our criteria to enter in-school credit recovery, trying to obviously look at students sooner rather than later to try to help them recover credits before they're so deficient that they may lean into an attendance issue because now I'm so far behind, I'm 7 credits behind, I'm 14 credits behind.
It's very easy to get into a failing mindset.
Correct, correct. So we've adjusted that. Given the first year back from the pandemic, we will and are in the process, the director of summer school and individual responsible for summer ISCR are going to look at that data, and then we'll make some decisions once we look at that data compared to the in-school data for credit recovery during the school.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I mostly just wanted to emphasize, I think it's a really important option that we have. And students are taking advantage or are being brought to take advantage of it, if that makes sense, right? And then my other question, sorry, I had it a second ago. Maybe come back to it. Sorry, I had it.
Great.
So you mentioned there was 133, they went to 145 that were failing 3 or more classes. I'm curious, was 45 students, how did they trend prior to the pandemic? Was it the same trend? So I guess we're trying to understand is, were they right on this path before, or did the pandemic accelerate or make it worse, or just make hard for them to actually put their coursework?
So I would need to look at those 45 students in the school year of 2019 to 2020. That was still partial pandemic.
Right.
So then I would have to go back to the school year prior to that, and I would be suspecting that those 45 students probably weren't here.
Right. So I'm really just trying to get a sense of, the students are become children of color, right? And wasn't just the pandemic, but was also a lot of social unrest, things that happened, or so on and so forth. So aside from the credit recovery component, I'm trying to understand if there's something else that's another influence to the students' behavior or attendance or so on and so forth, right? So I know you don't have it now. It's just something that we should probably look at, because as we're going forward and trying to make sure we have an equitable school for all the students, that we don't just look at this academic and ignore any variables that might influence that attendance, so on and so forth.
So the attendance during the pandemic was very low.
Yeah.
The pandemic, post-pandemic, those percents, they significantly changed, significantly.
For those 45?
Yes, the range was 9 to 88%, with 9 being like the outlier. 54, 61, 55, 57, 80, 52, 34, 54. So it was significant. Out of that, if I pulled the kids that were still below 20%, it'd be a handful.
If you said during remote learning, it was like 40.
Right, so when I noticed that these are students that work with West 40, changing an attendance pattern, students that are disengaged from school, that takes some time. So what I will do is follow those 45 this school year.
Okay.
So can definitely, in some fashion, give an update on these 45 at midterm, maybe December, and how they're doing. And then watch them, which was my plan, to watch them to the end of the school year and see if we continue to see that improvement as we distance ourselves from that year and a half that they spent at home.
And I remember what my favorite switch was. Oh, sorry.
No,
You said.
Okay. Mine was, it wasn't a question, but just a comment that I was really pleased to see the extension of tutoring hours from 5 to 7. I've been hearing from a lot of parents that, especially like the sports parents and so on, whose kids were not able to access tutoring beforehand, so they're really happy about it, and I love the virtual tutoring option. I hope we can make that work. So.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, couple of things. What we're talking about, the expanded tutoring hours, which I think is it's wonderful. It's the exact reason we built the Student Resource Center. And I hope that the entire Resource Center is available for expanded hours. One of the big questions I have, especially because we revised freshman curriculum, it has to do with eighth and ninth transition. We talked about the data that you have for our kids, for the ninth, 10th, and 11th graders. Do you have data? All right, have you been able to get it from D97 and D90 on the kids who are coming in? So that, and I know you got the early warning system and all that, but that we can basically give them the supports they need, all right, and get them, right as they almost walk in the door next week.
Yes.
And do you have that? Have we've gotten that from our feeder districts?
Yes, our learning analytics coordinator for Student Key has acquired that data, and they use that data to bring in students for the 8 to 9 summer bridge program that would benefit from just that connection, like you're saying, that might be already indicating areas of struggle.
Do you have is there any kind of metrics as to how many kids you would evaluate be appropriate for that bridge program and how many actually participated?
Off the top of my head, I don't have it, but I could easily get that.
Okay, I have, I guess, two questions and a comment, or two questions. One, you sent some supplemental information upon, request looking at prior, but, in that data, I'm looking at that shows 89 students in 2018, but that's a different cohort, or?
It's not, yes, this cohort that I'm talking about from 20 to 21 and 21 to 22, those are the same.
Yeah,
grades.
so the difference being that one,
Correct.
this is just a number of students
Just
versus this.
pre-pandemic, the
Yeah.
number of students with 3 or more Fs was 89.
Okay, so it's just a piece of it. Thank you for that clarification, but at least it provides at least some perspective.
Yes.
And the second is that, it just, the word attendance just keeps coming, as a clear thing and what we can do and to understand and address. I mean, if the student's if they give up, they're not in school, it's hard to learn, right?
Yes.
So I know that relates to even our goals is how do we address that? But that seems to be just a common.
I think it is common, it's a common problem. I think that collectively, the school is doing a lot of things in different places to support and address this. So Ms. Parker and the culture of the building, doing a lot around just creating an environment where kids want to be here. That's probably one of the first steps to getting a student to attend, is creating that environment. Today, there was some work, and tomorrow there'll be more work around how teachers play a significant role in that, and what are some strategies they can use to continue to create that environment and support that environment. So I think with the work that Ms. Parker and the culture of the building and all of our staff are going to do to get the students here in an environment where they will want to learn, and then you begin to layer on top of it all of the systems of support, that's really when I think we will begin to see even more improvements in attendance. Can't say how much, but I think you have to have both of those things. And we are doing, I think, a very good job this year collectively to bring both pieces, the environment plus the interventions together.
I was glad to see, in fact, that you revised the attendance policy to so that only unexcused absences would be counting against, because I think that's a huge improvement for it was sort of a brute force method before to try and keep kids in the seats, and this approach seems much more actually effective.
It's a great credit to the culture of the building and Ms. Parker, but they pulled that together.
If there are, I don't want to interject this too quickly, so if there are no more questions on this exact one, I'd like to add one more student learning piece.
Yeah, I think we're complete with this item, so.
You know, this board report does a nice job of hitting a specific question from the board, right? That had come up last year, but I also want to throw one more student learning piece, and because it's a committee meeting, I feel free to do this. Last year, in a lot of ways, post-pandemic, with all of our kids in-house for the first time in a year and a half or so, was a really solid year for high-level student achievement at OPRF. We have recently gotten in the data from the College Board, not completely polished and finalized, but the data from the College Board for our advanced placement testing. And a few things are true that really are pointing in a really positive direction. First, we've tracked this data over the past 7 years, understanding that at that point, we really started to grow the AP program. 1,768 students took an AP test last year. That's the highest number we've ever had at OPRF. Also, what we saw last year is 6 of those subjects and 6 of those subject tests, the students on average performed at their high watermark throughout that 7-year span. And then you can think, oh, well, maybe those 6 courses are ones where we didn't have a whole lot of kids enrolled in those courses, so it's not the case. In 4 of those 6 courses that hit their high water average mark on the AP test, they had their highest enrollment ever. So the idea that a lot of schools, when they came back from the pandemic, and it's OPRF is a special place to be. And a lot of schools struggle with getting kids ready for high levels of learning post-pandemic. And that is true here as well, too, of course. But goodness, to hit high water marks not only in participation, but in the number of classes that hit their highest level of learning as measured by average scores for kids who took the test. This is really something that I think our teachers should be exceptionally proud of over the past few years. So, we're talking here about kids who have most struggled, but there are other ways to take a look at student learning, and I would be remiss if I didn't throw that recent information out as well.
So Dr. Johnson, you're always welcome to interject into this special program. Such wonderful, exciting, positive stuff. Okay, we are complete with that. Thank you. And on to your.
I think I'm supposed to be here for this.
Yes, you are. It's okay.
But I appreciated you sitting here with my folks.
Transition.
Well, yeah, we are on to COVID mitigation, I need my glasses to be clean.
Yeah, and so before we just go into this item for a very brief bit of information, I want to highlight that sitting with us here at the table is somebody who is on our on the agenda and our personnel recommendations for the special meeting a little bit. So this is our recommended new hire as our interim executive director of special education, Andrew Newman. So welcome to the table on an item that has been going on for quite some time, but you have been a part of in this capacity for a good old 6 days. So thank you for taking the helm on this just for a moment. But I'll lead the way with an introduction of this. Throughout this past summer, we have done some work trying to figure out exactly how we're going to approach mitigations, for this school year related to COVID-19. We have collaborated to a large extent with District 97 on the approach. And we're working pretty tightly together in making sure that how parents and families experience the pandemic, as we shift into this next year is pretty parallel. So you can see the various categories listed here. From the table, thank you, Karen, is here to answer any questions that folks might have as well. I think that's it. If there are any questions, feel free to ask. This is really, in a large measure, exactly where we were with things last spring. With one really significant change, I guess, and that's regarding shield testing. We do have a partnership going with Shield for this school year, but it is going to be specific to outbreak. So.
Can I ask a wonder about that? Like, how was that determined that was?
It was determined based off of the value of participation that we had in the formal model in the spring. As we got more and more into the spring, we really saw it with double digits number of participation on a weekly basis. And we had over 2,400 kids who were enrolled in the program, but we're talking about 30, 40, 50 kids on a weekly basis who are really participating. The resources that it took for us to roll that out were just simply extensive.
Yeah.
And so we'll monitor this, and our relationship with Shield is strong. And we will, if we need to, at some point throughout this semester pivot, we'll do it.
We all hope the numbers go down.
But we hope we don't need to.
Yeah.
That's right.
I just to confirm, I checked this with you, masking. I don't think we need to require masks, but even if we wanted to, we legally can't, right? Because that comes down from the state.
Yeah, and that's because of the fact that we can't engage in any exclusionary practices. And if we require masks, we have to have substance behind it, and that would be at some point removed from the classroom of the school. And
we have
will
no
not do that.
options from the state to
It's not possible.
Right.
Thank you.
Questions? I had one question. It says pending a renewal of our MOA. So can you provide some context of what that status is?
Yeah, that is
regarding just.
Last year, we got into an MOA with Faculty Senate regarding a host of elements. This had to do with vaccinations and had to do with weekly testing of those who weren't fully vaccinated. A lot of that stuff that we had a year ago just simply doesn't apply to the school year. But what does apply is how we want to support student learning if the kid is out due to COVID. And so I had very positive after conversations with our Faculty Senate Chair about this, and we will plan to provide students who are home because of COVID-19, improving COVID-19 case, access to the classroom via kind of a one-way Zoom experience. Okay, which is exactly what we were last spring. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
Remember to have more attendance question, which is currently do doctor appointments and like mental health appointments count as excused absences or not?
Yes, they do.
They're excused. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I had a parent ask me, it was unclear to them from our site, so I might want to just make sure it's visible for parents. And I really appreciated the kind of the little summaries of the board meetings that have been going out. I think they've been really clear and helpful, and I think this is super useful information. I don't really need to be at this level of detail, but I'd love to see this high, the relevant pieces highlighted in the next one. There's something that, so that we have a very clear sense of this.
Okay, I think that covers our instructional section. Moving us into policy and safety and security updates.
Yeah, so on to an incredibly important and urgent topic for everybody here. Coming to the table here are three folks for the conversation. First, Ron Anderson, who's earlier tonight, Linda Parker, our assistant superintendent principal, and Sherilyn Jones McLeod, our new for this school year director of campus safety, who has really taken the lead on not only organizing the information that we have here and leading this from kind of a logistics, strategic implementation perspective, but from an education and professional development perspective, you've taken the lead here, and that has been something that has been very much appreciated and needed at the district level. So thank you for your leadership here, and I'll turn it over for you all for a brief introduction to this and questions. Okay.
Thank you. Recognizing that this is a very sensitive topic for everyone at this time, we want to make sure that those who are listening in our community know that safety is primary in terms of where it is on our mind and our focus. Sherilyn, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, has been spending most of the summer just making sure that we are revamping a lot of our processes, protocols, and procedures, focusing mostly on getting individuals trained so they know what to do in instances of emergency, making sure that the building understands that this is a joint effort, that it's not just our campus safety and support that is doing this work, they're leading us in the work, but we're all responsible for safety within the building, making sure that individuals are trained in terms of the staff, post assignments improved, and just making sure that we're systematizing our data collection and focusing in on best practices for the responses to emergencies in the building. So that's the background to the work. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sherilyn so she can speak about some of our summary of findings.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. The board memo that we presented includes a lot of the relevant information on our safety measures and such. Most of the things that we've been working to enhance are an enhanced training plan for the year to ensure that our campus safety officers are trained in all of our best practices as it pertains to emergency preparedness, active assailant, CPR first aid, restraint, proper restraint when there's altercations of our students. We're also repositioning our staff around the building so that our more seasoned officers are in locations during the key times of the day, which are like lunch times and after school times, as opposed to some of our newer or part-time officers who have traditionally been in our cafeterias during those times. The seasoned officers who have been here for years know what to look for, what to look out for. So we're planning to shift them around so that when it's not lunchtime, they can be in their posts securing the building, but during lunchtime, they can be repositioned with a better use of their time and skill and expertise. We're also creating better protocols for the patrols, so ensuring that we are better monitoring our bathrooms and the SRC, the lunchrooms, and the field house, and all of our gym areas that are a little more out of the way. We're making sure that they're doing loops past all of those areas to ensure we have less damage to the property as it pertains to vandalism of our students tearing up things inside of the bathrooms and throughout the building. And then the other things that we're working on and have been trained on is our improved incident command system. Today, actually, we train not only our campus safety officers, but buildings and grounds in emergency preparedness because they are our eyes and ears of the campus. We are looking into electronic communication with our students and families in the event of an emergency and they're outside of the building, like during off-campus lunch or sporting events away from the building, so that if there is an emergency in the building, they're notified not to return to the building, as well as our evening staff who are coming in later in the evening. Additionally, we're requiring IDs for all students and staff throughout the building, throughout the day, as they enter the building, as they enter every classroom, as they enter lunch. We also have temp machines on every floor, so that if a student forgets their ID, loses it, we can provide them with a temp ID. That way we are able to easily at a glance see who is supposed to be in our building, who is not. And we have been revising our emergency response materials that are throughout the building to ensure that they have a better flow and easier to read. Because in the middle of an emergency situation, we want our teachers to be prepared to be able to flip to the right incident and know exactly what to do without having to read long paragraphs.
I'm gonna add just one thing, that we are truly trying to also emphasize the importance of relationship building throughout our building, because what we know for sure is that in instances of school shootings, there's always staff in the school who may have known that person, who knew something or saw something and was off and either sounded alarms, didn't sound enough alarms, but it was recognized through relationships from your frontline people, which is everyone working with students in the building. So it's really important that we're building those relationships so that we can see if there are issues happening with students that need more addressing before there becomes a true issue.
And also our emergency response we do annually with our first responders to make sure that they have all of the information they need when they arrive to the building if anything ever happens. And they have access to like the elevators and EMT people have, like they did walk through today to make sure that they get inside certain elevators, to make sure that their fobs work to get in the building, to get on the elevator inside of the places that we put them.
And lastly, just one other thing to add, we want to reallocate some of our funding to ensure that we have enough staff on the floor during the day and evening times, so that we can secure the building properly.
We'll also need to provide professional development every institute day and every chance we get to our, not only our security, but the maintenance staff as well, because once any kind of emergency happens, maintenance becomes security as well, because they have to go to the security channel. So if they see anything, they need to be eyes and ears in the building just as well as security.
And left to me is the information about intergovernmental agreement. So as we have mentioned before, part of the unintended consequences of the vote a few years back now to not have a school resources officer in the building is that all of the other things that were in that IGA were no longer in place. And this is data sharing, it's communication protocols, those types of things with Oak Park Police. We have been in conversation with Oak Park Police for a while now to draft an IGA that fills in these gaps, and one that asks the critical question. And it's one that I think we need a public conversation on, and I think the board needs a conversation about what role do we want an officer to play in this building. That is something that is at least an important conversation for us. I know it's on the minds of a lot of people in our community in various ways, and it is something that we would be remiss not to consider. Now, an IGA right now is drafted, and it is in the process of legal review back and forth with village attorneys and with our own. And we anticipate being able to bring that here very, very soon to the board, hopefully as soon as the regular meeting in 2 weeks from now. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. But that is something here that I think needs a board discussion on some level as well.
Can I just ask, what's the IGA?
Intergovernmental agreement.
Thank you.
Intergovernmental.
Wait, questions?
That's it.
Ralph.
Ralph? Yes, thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, thanks. And so first thing, it pains me to the core of my being that you have to do this on your jobs, but I appreciate the fact that you're doing it. I just want you to know that it shouldn't be that we should be this worried about violence at this level in an educational setting, but we have to be. The world is changing. So I appreciate the seriousness with which you're taking it. And I appreciated this memo. I like the fact that you're working on best practices. But Greg, I want to follow up on something you said about the resource officer. I recall when we took that vote that Dr. Pruitt-Adams, your predecessor, had hoped that we would keep the resource officer on staff and invent a new and nationwide leading role for the resource officer as more of a partner in educating children, students, about civics and civic engagement, and to be sort of an avenue for students to interact with and ask questions of. I don't know if you've had any follow-up with Dr. Pruitt-Adams, or if she shared with you any of the concepts she had, but I felt it was an interesting idea at the time. Do you have any information you could share with the board to read in advance, or is there any prep, what she was thinking, or what your feelings are, Greg, about that? And maybe modifying the role to make it a more positive, less negative one?
Yeah, absolutely. I share her thinking in that. Absolutely. I haven't had any recent conversations with her, but those very questions are ones that have come up in our conversations with both the United States and the village. You know, it's talking about what this might look like and how it would unfold. And they have involved conversations about engaging folks who work in the at the police department, officers, in not only social and emotional education that we are and trainings that we are working on here as a school, but they've all been founded on the idea that we do need to recognize that in this country, of course, there is a very real challenge that especially people of color experience when it comes to law enforcement. Our belief as a school district, though, is that the way through that is education and relationships. And so anything we might do with the police department in terms of being first responders and crisis managers of what goes on in a school has to be grounded within that perspective and enhance and grow that perspective. Ignoring that perspective, ignoring the relationships that need to happen between not only public bodies and the systemic level, but between human beings who have different roles in society is something that we do at our own peril. And so we've seen the unintended consequences of that over the past year. And I'm not talking about the two incidents that a few months ago were on everybody's mind here at OPRF. I'm talking about just simply the relationships that we have as an institution and some of the individuals here have with administration and officers with Oak Park Police. Those are relationships we have to nurture and foster in this school in one way or the other. So Ralph, to speak to your point, we've had conversations trying to explore the types of trainings that happen within the police department and better understanding the social emotional training and the de-escalation trainings and all those things that they go through, but also recognizing that whatever partnership we have, and there's something by code, by the way, where we need a partnership, we need a member on our crisis team here in the school. We need an officer as a member of our crisis team. We need it here in the school. But making sure that individual would be trained in our practices here as a school is something that we really want to have a discussion of. Now, whether we're able to do that right now through an IGA is something that we need to have a conversation on. But Ralph, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I certainly echo my predecessor's thoughts on that matter, and we are right now in those complex but yet incredibly important conversations with the village. And D97 is part of those conversations too. They've been really good partners with this, as they have been for the previous board members we were talking about.
Yeah, that's good. That's great, Greg, and I appreciate the way you're approaching it. And this is an area that's fraught, right? And I think you highlighted a lot of the reasons, but I mean, we see every day you pick up the newspaper and it's not just Illinois, it's across the nation where there's been incredibly racist, violent behavior committed by police officers against specifically Blacks and Latinx, and no justification for it. So having that as part of the conversation as we work through this to build a relationship, I think has to be front and center and has to be part of the discussion. But if we could find a way to lead and educate and build relationships that are more positive in this area, I think that's all good. I honestly don't know if we can get it done, but I appreciate your willingness to talk about it. I appreciated Dr. Pruitt-Adams wanting to investigate it. I was one of the board members that voted in favor of removing the resource officer for all the reasons you cited, Greg. But maybe we could find a more positive way to do it and create a model that works. And that's a maybe, but I'm willing to have the discussion.
So I see kind of two different things here. First of all, I really appreciate it. I want to thank you guys for the work that you're doing. It really seems that you're hardening the building. All right. One of the questions I do have, because I thought I heard, are kids swiping into classrooms as well as into the building?
They just need to have that on.
Okay, so they have to have them on.
And those who go out for lunch have to
Swipe
swipe in
back
and
in.
out. Yeah.
They swipe out.
It's out
And
and
then
back
back
in
in.
and back in.
All right, so basically, we will have at any point in time, in real time, a record of who's in the building.
Not
Because
necessarily.
kids have swept in the morning, we know they're, no?
They just come in with their ID. So it's ID card on, facing forward, and they're coming in, but we are not
Oh,
swiping.
you're not swiping them in.
But at lunchtime, we know who's left the building and then we know who's re-entered.
That I don't think I had understood. But I understand that, I mean, this is definitely a hard need of the building. The issue with active shooters, accessing, it's a difficult one. Because we know we've got a 1 million square foot building with what, 14 entrances? How many entrances we have? Something like that. It's 14, right? 12, okay. And we know with teenagers, if there's a will, there's a way. And regardless of what protections we put in. And I don't think we're at a point where we want to go to metal detectors and put backpacks and that kind of thing. It's just not our culture. In this community. So I think.
We do that at O'Hare Airport.
Excuse me.
We do that at O'Hare Airport.
No, excuse me, this is our meeting.
I know, but I'm a
No,
parent.
please don't.
I'm a parent that had two
Yes,
kids
but
come
this is
here.
our meeting and.
Your meeting, you guys are representing us,
respond
aren't
to the
you?
public.
Are you guys representing us, the parents, or are you representing yourselves?
Excuse me, ma'am, we're having a
My name
meeting.
is Julie.
Excuse me, Julie, we're having a meeting and we ask that you please let us have our meeting.
I mean, to me, it seems like it's two separate issues.
Excuse me, let me continue.
Yes.
So
No,
basically,
it's-
the parents aren't welcome to you guys' board
No, you,
meetings.
parents are welcome.
We pay a
You
lot
have-
of
you have
taxes,
3 minutes,
but we're
you
not
have-
welcome.
You have 3 minutes of public comment.
I'm so happy with
And
those
this
3
is
minutes.
this is the board's, the school district's business meeting. All right.
You guys
We
have
are-
any
we
kids
are- I
in
am
school? Does
asking
anybody on this
questions
board
about
have
our
kids in
ma'am.
school? Any skin in the game?
Julie?
Because you know what? This is a scary issue for us parents. So don't come at me.
I'm just saying, we understand, we're not gonna solve it this way.
I understand that, but I really don't understand how you guys don't get what is going on out there.
It's not bad, it's just not.
And there are two different issues that we're talking about. We're talking about, I mean, it's awful what's happening, okay? But we also need to keep our kids and our staff safe.
And
When we have a child, a student that was arrested and he's still sitting in jail waiting to get sentenced because he came into school with a gun, that's pretty scary
Time
for
out.
parents.
Yeah, can we move? Yeah, we need to have our.
We need
was talking about an active shooter. And to me, and when you look at it, and I have been to one conference, a safety conference I went a few years ago, school safety conference, and the keynote speaker was Frank DeAngelis, who was the former principal of Columbine. He was the principal at the time that their tragedy. The real issues are dealing with the kids from the social emotional and mental health aspect. And that's where we really need to focus. And to me, is the preventative aspects. All right, are those kids can feel comfortable. All right, coming into this building with a problem. All right, with an issue, and having somebody who is their champion or mentor, whatever you want to call it, who is an adult, a trusted adult that they can go to. And I think though that we have to have our eyes open, and our ears open, and we have to find that and I think kids today are a little more apt to do that than they were maybe 5 to 6 years ago. But we still have to be vigilant on it. The other issue about the SRO, I think that vote was taken before I was elected to the board. I had a couple of conversations with Dr. Adams, and I did actually have a conversation at one point in time with our former chief, Chief Reynolds, who wanted to come to the board, to our board, and have give a presentation as to what a school resource officer can do, and what the program should look like, and what it should be about, and just give the board an overview. You know, we know he's moved on to bigger and better things, but I think that that's one of the first steps, because I have probably a view that may be a little different than other board members or other community members of what a school resource officer is. I mean, my personal opinion, I don't think it's law enforcement and building. I think it is about building relationships and things that Ralph was talking about. You know, I think our first step could and should be to to ask the chief, Chief Johnson, if she'd be willing to come in and speak about it. And I know that she has some pretty strong opinions as well. And I think that's the way to start the dialogue, instead of the that was about all I. Thank you.
Sarah?
So, and Linda, we've talked about this, or at least I've heard you talk about this in other contexts. We had the student, the SSAC, what was the initials, the student superintendent?
Advisory council.
Right, and some of these conversations came up there, of course, we had students actually kind of giving us some suggestions or talking about their concerns. And so one of the things that I remember coming up in that conversation was around all of our doors, right, which has come up a little bit tonight, and how it's very hard to police those. So I'm wondering what we're doing to kind of, without further jeopardizing our students' mental health, to sort of educate students about, make sure, for example, you gave this example before, right? Like, make sure no one's coming in as you're leaving, and, if you see something, say something, et cetera, without making our kids paranoid, right? Like, how are we going about educating students on how to communicate about these concerns?
So in the morning, we typically have 4 doors open. We're cutting that down to 3, so to make sure we have appropriate security at all the doors, and we have appropriate security to the rooms to ensure that the other doors are not blocked. We are asking to reallocate some of our funding to increase the number of officers we have on the floor during the daytime, and that kind of has a positive effect to shift some of our part-time officers to the night shift as well, so that we'll have a more balanced staff At night, we don't have a lot of officers, so that we can have more officers during both times to ensure that our building is safe. But going forward, tomorrow, I'm actually doing a full school training to all of our faculty and staff around how everyone can keep us safe, not allowing students to tailgate them inside of the building and all and so forth. But I'm also working with the communications department to develop videos to be played during advisory for our students to learn those same things, more about our emergency procedures and how to be safe when they're coming in and out the doors. If they're leaving out of the building and they don't feel safe, notifying security so that our outside officer can loop around or escort them out of the building. We're trying to do some things to make sure that our students feel safe as well. And before I started officially, I came to one of the student forums, student safety forums, so that I can hear some of their feedback as well. So we're trying to implement some of the things they asked.
Thank you, and I want to compliment you on what I see as increased rigor around this, right? Like the procedures and making sure that we have everything sort of laid out very clearly, so thank you.
Thank you. We are also starting the school year just with a welcome video for the students, but then also like some of the things to remember as you're going around the building in order to keep safety as the primary focus. So some of the door exits that we have had talked about in the past have been like unauthorized, like at lunchtime leaving out doors that you're not supposed to. So we're going to make sure that we have more eyes on those doors so that students can be redirected as opposed to just taking those liberties and just going outdoors unsuspecting of what might be behind those doors when they go out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kubri?
So as I'm listening to the conversation, and particularly the one with the resource officer, what role they play in the school again, I'm going to the framework of goals, objectives, and policy. So there's a goal, trying to keep it safe. I'm blocking the camera. Talk my hands, sorry. It's the safety of the school, that's the goal. The objectives, then the policies would be follow that, right? So what I don't quite understand is what 1,000 square foot building? I was one.
Million.
I'm sorry, my bad, I said million. It's late, I meant a million. It's late and I want to sleep. But if it's a 1 million square foot building, how does one officer make that safer, right? So the question really is, if we're trying to make the school safer from the students, so you know what they are, right? And how is one person going to make a difference? Because even in Uvalde, we saw that multiple failed, right? So what is the objective of bringing the person back and what role they play? Because if the goal is to make it safer, how are we going to do that with that one officer? It'll make you feel good? Because the reality is TSA at the airport is not very effective. If the studies have shown, they miss a lot, but you feel good about it because there's no shoe bomber, right? All these things happening, but is it really making you safer? No, it's not. So before we just have knee-jerk reaction and a very impetuous decision, I think we should really talk about this. What are we actually trying to achieve here, right? Because one officer is not going to solve that problem. To go to the point of Fred, the mental health, what happens is kids are shooting. There was something that was missed at home, in a school, with friends, with so on and so forth. Once they're authoritative or done by someone telling someone, hey, this happened. So what I'm getting back to is one officer is not going to solve this problem. I won't feel any better about it. And that's what my daughter was here. She's gone. My kids are in the D97. So yes, I am concerned about it too. But I'm also concerned about is the reaction that a uniform officer might have on certain students. I'll tell you right now, as a 40-year-old black man, I don't have a good reaction because we had an incident in Alabama where my family and I were handcuffed, detained for hours. At gunpoint, we fit the description. I'm not comfortable. Not saying it's not a role for them, but to think that it's just, oh, bring me or be safe, I'm not comfortable all the time. I do kind of look twice at a person over my lights behind, I kind of tense up. That was 6 years ago. So all that to say, if we're going to have this discussion, make sure all the stakeholders are there having this discussion. The feedback I'm giving you is at this discussion. It's not just me. I can guarantee it's not just me having this experience with law enforcement, right? And what is the objective we're trying to achieve? If it's safety, how does that actually happen and work backwards? I think the goal, objective, and the policy. Because I'm not going to just say, yeah, bring it back because I feel good about it. Why? has to make sense, has to meet a certain objective and policy for us as a community in the school district.
Okay, thank you. Gina?
Thank you. I want to first say thank you for the memo that you gave us with all the information in it. I think that if we have community members that actually read what you put in there, so they would understand that there, what is it, a team of 16?
36.
36, right. So we have 36 safety personnel in our building at various times throughout the day. I think it's important for people to understand that and what that means, and the racial relationships that I have personally heard students say to me, the relationships they have with these amazing people that work with us. So I want to thank you for that, because what I heard also in what you presented and what you put in the memo was that this training that you're going to be doing in person, right? Increasing again, the opportunity for people to know each other, to recognize each other, to build and develop those relationships, which we know that is what prevents these things from happening in our schools. And thank you. I always want to say Dr. No, can't help it. So it must be us. But thank you, Ms. Parker, for your recognition. First off, that this is a school-wide effort. This is a full-on, all the adults, all of the students, all of us having the same conversation around what does it look like, right? And knowing those warning signs, right? It's so important for us to know those warning signs, and for the students and the adults to know warning signs when they see them as well, because those are the things that prevent. I too was one of the board members who voted in favor of the removal of school resource officers and spoke in favor of removing school resource officers from the middle schools as well because of the policing. Now, I personally believe and know, as a social emotional learning educator, and I educate educators in this, that is the way that we're going to solve what's happening or what we're seeing. That everything else is going to be power and control, which is not necessarily shown or demonstrated that is effective for altering student behavior. We know that that's not effective for altering student behavior, and that's why we're changing the ways that we do things. So I just wanted to thank you for those pieces. I had a question about when will we see the IGA, a sample of that? Because I do understand that there are things that happen. We do live in a world where things happen, and teenagers, Fred said it, teenagers are gonna be teenagers and do stuff. So I wanna know, like, how soon we'll see that IGA, because whatever conversations are being had with our police department and other agencies, fire department, around how their interactions with our students, I'm really looking forward to seeing what exactly is that going to, conversation going to be like.
I would love to be able to give you a precise date, but I can tell you that both, I've had conversations with Kevin Jackson and folks in the village on that matter. We both share an urgency to get something to this board as quickly as we can to discuss. Now, it is in that process, like I said, of legal review, and I can't predict, right, exactly how that's going to unfold. But if we, like I said, if we can get it to the board to discuss in 2 weeks, we will. But we might not be able to do it till our September committee meeting. Okay.
Will there be some opportunity for you to let us know some of the things that you all are looking at? Is it possible for us to get some level of report that says these are the pieces that we would like to enhance and discuss as far as it pertains to police matters that would be happening outside or near the school that would need that level of support?
Absolutely, that's very doable.
Okay, and I think I have one more comment. As an educator in a school, in 4 school buildings, I work across 4 different buildings, so I'm in and out of school buildings all day. And there's a conversation that's being had, and I just wanna say this, that the conversation that's being had that's creating more division around what actually needs to happen to keep our students safe, the division conversation is not purposeful. It's not purposeful as an educator. It's not purposeful in our schools. The purpose that we're here, and me personally as an educator, is to ensure that students have everything that they need to be and become who they've come here to be. That does not mean policing them. It does not mean that for me. What it means for me is what supports do they need and how do we put those in place. And I think as a board, that's within our role. The idea of, I just have to say, I wasn't gonna say this, but the idea of hardening the building, I don't think that language of hardening the building, we have children in our buildings. We want to keep the building safe. But that language is challenging as well as confronting for me as a Black woman and for families and students. So I think that when we're having conversations about what's needed in our schools, what's needed is safety, a safe environment, that they know that they're safe coming in, that we know that we're all safe, and that we're doing everything that we can to keep people safe. And what I saw in the memo and what I heard from you all was exactly that you're doing all of those pieces. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Marianne?
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. So I had a question about communications specifically, and also I want to broaden, I suppose, that we're talking about safety and security, and I know that the focus of the conversation has been on external violence from, and I just want to make sure that we also have in the framework self-harm and other forms of harm that our kids here may encounter. And honestly, I think probably are more likely to encounter with more frequency. And so my question is this: I really appreciate, you say in this that previously you had tried to communicate with the public in as much detail as possible, and that is that's not necessarily the best approach, because what's initially known about an incident might not be entirely accurate, and sometimes it may take several days of investigation just to learn all the relevant details as well. You all have to take into account confidentiality of minors, right? So you can't say everything we know right away. And so I appreciate that your new procedure will be to issue a brief holding statement as soon as possible, let the school committee know that we're aware of investigating it, and we're going to follow up with more detailed communication. And I think that's very much the right approach. I feel like this is something that the public has been learning, just in terms of as we see social media around, whether it's a mass shooting incident or whatever else, that there was this kind of 10 years ago, people would just take everything they saw as gospel and spread it. And now people are like, wait, let's wait until we, actually know what's going on. But it's an ongoing cultural education process, and our students are there with their phones and, taking videos, and the videos get passed around and so on. So I just think we have to keep working on that and keep continuing to educate the community about it. And so here's my question. I wonder, we have on the school website, we have some district dashboards, right, that have to do with academics. There's a strategic one and so on, the Illinois School Report Card. And we had, during the pandemic, we had a pandemic dashboard, right? Let's say that there is a safety concern. Maybe one student tells a parent about, I'm worried about this other kid self-harming, whatever, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be a violence from the external kind of incident. If I were, my daughter is a freshman, or going to be a sophomore here. If she came to me with something like that, I wouldn't immediately know from the website, where should I go with that information, right? So I'm wondering if we should have a safety page with information for the parents on if you are aware of a student who may self-harm or other forms of imminent danger, this is the procedure for you as a parent. And if it's there already and then I missed it because I was looking for this information earlier in the year. So, and then also, but perhaps also, just sort of a centralized safety page that has here's some of the things we're doing, here's the people who are working on this, and then maybe a little dashboard so that when there is an incident, if there is an incident that the general public would be asking about, you can put the statement there too, so that when people are having these Facebook conversations, we could say, go look at the dashboard page. That's where you're going to get the accurate information, right? So And if it's all here already, then I'm sorry, and I just missed it. So, so that was my question.
Typically, for what you mentioned in terms of the example of self-harm, that would be something that would be listed under our PSS, People Support Services page that has our counselors and social workers and student services. And then on the back of every ID card, there are specific hotlines given for students, and all faculty had it too, in terms of what to call if it's a self-harm. That one wouldn't necessarily be under safety in that respect. But I do hear what you're saying in terms of like just a safety one for, say, another one of the incidents that we were speaking of.
Yeah, I don't know, like this is just, sorry, it's just kind of, I mean, I almost feel like you could have a branching thing on like, you know, is this a counselor issue? Is this a, you know,
it's like a flow chart.
Yeah. Because as a parent, I don't have the ID card, right, on me, so.
I thank you so much for that. And something that I am looking to work on is the outward facing site for campus safety. Right now, there's a whole lot of information. So once we have all of our procedures solidified, we want to be able to update it so that parents have a better understanding of what we're doing in the building.
Because I think a lot of the, no, that's it, go ahead.
Right, so a few comments, I think, you know, it's been great input from my peers here. I think, first of all, this is your house, right? You're in this, you live here, you're here, and if there's anybody who wants their house to be safe, it's the one living in it. And so our job is to support you as best we can, as you know, with what you need, whether we have insight from the outside, but really to listen. So I think what you've presented, you know, you're thinking this thing through and doing a lot of good things. I was actually listening to the superintendent from Highland Park, from the elementary schools, talking on the radio about safety, and just the thought of having that, you know, be in that role, having to do it, but doing all kinds of things, and we're doing, and from parallelism, we're doing good things. This is multifaceted, you know, from whether it's, you know, really what the core issues are versus how do we deal with an issue. So my kind of thoughts as we to provide you are somewhat following what Gina was saying. I think when we talk about the IGA, you know, what are the elements of it? Because I'm thinking of it from an outside the building perspective, right? Of what is it that we need in terms of support from the outside, right? You know, I was enlightened as you know, as I read some of the feedback, you know, of the signs, the visible signs when you're approaching the building that things aren't good. And how do our neighbors, because it's not just those in the building, and it's not just parents, it's our community. How do our neighbors know something's up? I think that's important in a situation. In your notes, there's reference to, I mean, from my background, drills. I know it's not, you know, fun, but you need to know what to do without letting the brain engage when you're in a tough situation. It needs to come off your head, and people need to know what to do. So if we're doing drills as a box checking exercise, we're not going to get much value. If we're doing them so that we're trying to make sure that when we need to do something based on muscle memory, we can do it, then we've had some success on that one. And yeah, that you know, those are kind of more some of the another layer which is outside the external perspective. But I think you know, you got a lot of pieces here, and I know it's your house, and we've got to keep moving toward it. So thank you.
Can I just make one?
Please.
I really thank you all for all of your in-depth questions and comments, and I wanted to talk to Gina, and I do come from a trauma-informed background. We share a lot of our trauma-informed views, and so I definitely want to make sure that our students are socially, emotionally safe in our building. They feel that way, especially our students of color, not especially, but our students of color don't feel victimized or marginalized or under immense scrutiny as they're walking through the building and being policed. And so as we're looking at how we collaborate with our police and what we do, we want to make sure that we take all of those things into account. So we're not just like, oh yeah, bring back the SRO, but we want to make sure that we have the relationship, we're building the relationships around the community, not just with the police, but with the park district and the library and all of the other pieces in our community to keep our students safe no matter where they are. And so as we're moving forward, I try and think of this house, our house, as Disney World. Disney World's supposed to be the greatest place on earth, but to get into Disney World, you have to go through some barriers and make sure that people are safe to get in. And then once you're in, enjoy the fireworks and see the parade 12 times and spend all your money and go home broke. But I've been a few times. But we want to make sure that the perimeter of our building is so safe that when our students are in here, they can just be in Disney World and learn and play and have fun and be teenagers and mess up and do stupid things and help them learn not to do those. But we want to make sure our house is protected from the outside. So we'll keep working.
Thank you.
That's great.
Our next topic is future agenda items.
I have a question about future agenda items, if this is already on the agenda. The school start time. I don't know when that's coming around.
It's on the list. Good question.
Yes, so,
Okay.
yes.
That's all I need.
All right.
Well,
Good update.
yeah.
Okay.
That makes
All right, other future agenda items? Ralph?
Motion to adjourn.
No. Ralph, you had a future agenda item that you stated earlier.
Yeah, no, I Greg indicated that that's coming up, right? You've got that docketed for the, so I think that's been taken care of.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you didn't lose sight of it, so I'm got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I might talk a lot, but I also listen, Tom. I heard what Greg said.
Yeah, okay. With that said, now Ralph,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Betcha.
All opposed? Okay, we are going to flip right into, right?
Yep.
We have a special board meeting, so, let me get my,
We don't have to change.
yeah,
same one.
we're,
Okay.
do we need to do anything on the audio side, or
Nope,
Okay.
just keep going.
let's let it roll?
Let it roll.
Okay, I call to order the special board meeting of the Oak Park and River Forest High School Board of Education at 9:55 PM in the boardroom of OPRF High School. I ask for a roll call.
Mr. Arkin,
Here.
Mr. Henry,
Here.
Mr. Martieri,
Here.
Ms. Harris. Here. Ms. Spivey.
Here.
Dr. Maharaj.
Here.
Mr. Kowski.
Here. Our first order of business is public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No public comments.
Oh, okay. Our next area is action items. So our first action item is I move to approve the personnel recommendations, including new hires, transfers, and resignations.
Second.
Are there any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Spivey,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj,
Yes.
Mr. Kowski.
Yes. I approve, I move to approve the resolution authorizing preparation, placement for inspection and publication of the fiscal year 2023 tentative budget as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martyri?
Yes.
Mr. Arkin?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Spivey?
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes. I move the approval of the resolution authorizing issuance of notice of remedial warning to Thaddeus Sherman.
Second.
Are there any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Arkin?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Spivey?
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Martyri?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes. That completes our action items. And now we have future items. Does anyone have any new future items?
Folks had a bite at that apple. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?